Once their primarch was found, things began to quickly change for the First Legion. However, to understand these changes, we have to look at the origins of the primarch Lionel Johnson. Before the dawn of the Great War, the primordial pod carrying the infant primarch would mysteriously materialize through the turbulent currents of the warp, and as it sailed through the currents of the warp, it would eventually careen as it descended towards the heart of Caliban. This was a savage death world nestled within Segmentum Obscurus. Caliban's rugged terrain was cloaked in vast expanses of primeval forests, which were teeming with grotesque monstrosities which had been further malformed by the insidious influences of chaos, a legacy of their unfortunate location so near the Eye of Terror's malevolent aura. Amidst the unforgiving wilderness, the young Lionel Johnson found himself thrust into a battle of survival, navigating the treacherous landscape as a solitary figure far removed from the trappings and luxuries of civilization. As shadowed within the untamed wildernesses of Caliban, the primarch of the First Legion would forge his path as a lone warrior fighting against the ever-encroaching darkness, as tales of sighting him appeared all over Caliban as mere whispers in the winds and secrets seen in the monster-filled forests of Caliban. And here, nestled between the sprawling forests of Caliban, lay realms steeped in both legend and mystery, where valiant knightly orders of warrior aristocrats flourished, bound by duty to safeguard their people, and the towering fortress monasteries that served as bastions against the ever-encroaching horrors of Caliban's wilderness. These noble orders formed the center of Caliban's tumultuous history, upholding ancient traditions and wielding the remnants of bygone technology salvaged from the ruins of a forgotten era. Amongst these relics were primitive bolt pistols and rudimentary suits of power armor, reminiscent of the formidable armor which would be adopted by the Adeptus Astartes. These armors were passed down through generations as artifacts which bestowed upon their wielders the aura of martial prowess and ancestral honor. Yet despite the veneer of technological sophistication, Caliban itself remained rooted in a pre-industrial epoch, where warriors thundered into battle astride mighty steeds, as their thunderous hooves echoed throughout the verdant expanse. Chief amongst these knightly orders stood the creatively named The Order, which was a bastion of both commoners and nobles alike, united in a singular purpose, in order to succeed by transcending the rigid boundaries of Calibanite society. While others would draw their ranks exclusively from Caliban's noble elite, the Order embraced individuals of all walks of life, forging friendships and fellowships bound by courage and camaraderie. Somewhere around a century and a half would pass before the veil of time would part, revealing the long-lost primarch, Lionel Johnson, deep within the heart of Caliban's ancient forests. Here, amidst the towering foliage, roamed beasts of legend, remnants of a forgotten era, when chimeric monstrosities stalked the land, hungering for blood and conquest. Deep within this untamed wilderness, where echoes of civilization faded into darkness, the young lion would remain a silent enigma, his origins obscured by the veil of time, as tales whispered by knightly orders spoke of a youth forged in solitude, his form untouched by the passage of years, as generations passed and the same being was witnessed time and time again. This was a testament to the divine essence imbued by the Emperor's hand. Now, unfortunately, the exact duration of the lion's solitary vigil remains a matter mostly of conjecture and lost to the sands of time, while the knights who discovered him ventured to estimate his age based on mortal standards. The truth seems to elude comprehension, for the primarchs, being born of the Emperor's will, defy the laws of mortal existence and development. As the lion walked his solitary path within Caliban's wilderness, his survival hinged on being able to develop both cunning and skill. This deadly environment honed his instincts on a razor's edge, as he embraced the art of combat, not as a brute force, but as a delicate dance of strategy and precision. Each of his encounters became a deadly game of wits, where victory meant life and defeat spelled certain doom. With nothing but his bare hands and an iron resolve, the Lion faced the horrors of Caliban's depths, his determination becoming an unyielding force, an unbeatable strength amidst the darkness. Yet he was no mindless berserker driven by primal rage, but a calculating hunter guided by logic and reason. When the knights of Caliban stumbled upon this mysterious youth, they beheld a being so formidable that some deemed him no different than the savage beasts which roamed the depths. Yet it was the fateful judgment of a lone individual named Luther that would alter the course of the Lion's destiny, ushering him from the realm of beasts into the world of men. It was Luther, a stalwart defender of the realm, who discovered him and bestowed upon him the moniker Lionel Johnson, signifying his prowess and the bond with the forests itself. Under Luther's tutelage, the Lion embraced the noble traditions of the Order, learning to wield justice with a tempered hand and to channel his strength for the greater good. Forged in this crucible, the Lion found his purpose beyond mere survival, but as a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching forest's shadows, as Caliban was constantly gripped by the relentless onslaught of the great beasts which caused humanity on the planet to stand on the brink of oblivion. Even though the valiant efforts of the Order served as a bulwark against the ever-encroaching darkness, they could only delay the inevitable, as their numbers were dwindling in the face of insurmountable odds. Now that the Lion had been transported from the wilderness to the bastion of Alderbrook, he assimilated the customs and tactical acumen along with the use of the intricate Calibanite weaponry with unparalleled swiftness that left even his mentor Luther astonished. As he ascended through the ranks of the Order alongside Luther himself, emerging as formidable warriors, achieving the pinnacle of the Order's hierarchy. Propelled by the Lion's unwavering vision, the Order would embark on a crusade against the monstrous scourge that plagued Caliban's inhabitants. His call to arms echoed through the Order and beyond, igniting a fervor of liberation that could only come from a primarch. However, his path to victory was arduous, spanning a solar decade of relentless warfare against unyielding beasts lurking within the forest's depths. And in this unending battle, Lionel Johnson revealed not only his prowess as a warrior and a tactician, but his innate ability to inspire those around him. Each triumph against the beasts seemed to only bolster the ranks of the Order, regardless if they lost warriors, constantly drawing forth new recruits who dared dream of a future beyond mere survival at the edge of existence. Even though he was known for his affinity for solitude, Lionel Johnson's actions would propel him to the forefront of Caliban's transformative crusade. His presence on the battlefield, coupled with an unwavering resolve to act decisively, would define his leadership. In a bold departure from tradition, Lionel Johnson dismantled the age-old barriers restricting ascension to the upper ranks of the Order, extending a call to arms beyond the realms of nobility, and even beyond his own realms. This audacious move swelled the Order's ranks, albeit at the expense of dissent amongst the adherents to the traditional values of the Order. Those knightly orders resistant to join Lionel Johnson's movement faced swift and decisive retribution. The Knights of Lupus, entrenched in their northern fortress and wary of the upheaval promised by the demise of the great beasts, met their ends at Lionel Johnson's hand, their dissent silenced by the echoes of battle. In a mere decade, the Order burgeoned, empowering them to plunge deeper and deeper into the heart of Caliban's ancient woodlands. Guided by the Lion and Luther, they embarked on a relentless crusade which purged its ancestral lands of all manner of beast. The campaign was a protracted affair, marked by bloodshed and sacrifice. For every monstrous nest razed to the ground, scores of brave and fine warriors fell. All the while, the battle wore many to the bone. Yet amidst this carnage, the Lion's resolve remained resolute. To him, mercy and rest was a luxury war would ill afford. Only through the utter annihilation of their enemy could their centuries-old torment come to an end. Lionel Johnson's tactics were marked as equal parts cunning and ruthless. Ambushes while lurking in the shadow, poisoning tainted beasts' watering holes, and swaths of forest engulfed in infernal flames, all designed to drive the creatures into desperation. His warriors, in awe and trepidation, spoke of his exploits with a mixture of reverence and dread, for the lion's prowess was only matched by the terror he instilled in his quarry, an apex predator of this deadly world. As his influence grew, so would the trepidation amongst the remaining elite, because after the Knights of Lupus were eliminated, many balked at his unyielding methods and feared the seismic shifts in tradition and leadership he had heralded. Others harbored more sinister ambitions, coveting the power the Lion now wielded. In response to this dissent, the Lion would once again mete out swift justice. Traitors to Caliban's cause found themselves crushed beneath the weight of their own rebellion. Their fortresses, once symbols of defiance and strength, would be made to lay in ruins as grim graveyards and reminders of the consequences of defiance. As the crusade against the great beasts reached its conclusion, with both Lionel Johnson and Luther drained by the relentless tolls of battle, it was a Lion who would emerge as the preeminent figure of the world, who would be bestowed with the title of Grand Master of the Order and adorned with the accolades of victory. And as Lion accepted these honors with his characteristic stoicism, people would watch him in awe, as the trappings of human society paled in comparison to the trials he had endured amidst Caliban's wilds. Unbeknownst to the Lion, his ascent had not gone unnoticed by Luther, whose own transformation remained shrouded in the shadows of their shared past. Once comrades, now rivals, the bond between Luther and the Lion was irrevocably altered by the tide of fate. With each triumph, the Primarch seemed to ascend to greater and greater heights still, his glory casting a shadow over his once equal mentor and brother in all but blood. Yet blinded by his own success, the Lion failed to perceive festering seeds of envy which sprouted within Luther's heart, as he ignored the flames of jealousy kindled by his own achievements. As the Primarch continuously unknowingly wounded his brother, leaving behind a rift which would deepen in time. In a different era, this wound might have mended itself amidst the tranquility of Caliban's newfound peace. However, destiny seemed to have other plans. Descending from the celestial realms came the Emperor. It was on 846 M30 that the Emperor of Mankind, accompanied by a select cadre of 500 Astartes, hailing from the First Legion, would descend upon Caliban, in response to the Primarch's psychic presence. From the instant of the Emperor's arrival, the connection resonated between him and Lionel Johnson, hinting at a destiny entwined in the fate of the galaxy. Recognizing the bond forged between them, Lionel Johnson would pledge his unwavering allegiance to the Master of Mankind. In reciprocity, the Emperor bestowed upon the Lion the mantle of leadership over the newly reborn First Legion, who had been crafted from the Lion's own genetic blueprint. The Emperor's grand vision in the aftermath of Old Knight's demise had manifested in the Great Crusade, a monumental endeavor aimed at reunifying humanity's scattered colonies, reasserting its dominance over the stars. The Space Marine legions would be the instruments of the Emperor's will, spearheading his noble quest, eradicating all the Xenos oppressors from the galaxy, which would stand in the way of humanity's ascendancy. And the Primarchs, like Lionel Johnson, would lead these great men in war. Those who had come with the Emperor were veterans hailing from the renowned host of death. These warriors bore the distinct mantle of the First Legion, all clad in somber hues of jet black power armor, adorned with mortuary symbols. This was an ominous sight for all those in Caliban, harkening back to their fabled lore. As the Master of Mankind set foot within the Order's main fortress, those who viewed him and his son felt as if they were spectators in the annals of legend, as the towering warriors of the First Legion bowed in reverence and homage to the figure of Lionel Johnson, the valiant Knight of Caliban and Grand Master of the Order. In a moment that would echo throughout history, the Legion found itself faced with their progenitor, and in a gesture of profound sacrifice, Lionel Johnson sought to gauge the prowess and loyalty of his newfound sons by engaging in the trial of combat with the captain of the company, who had been clad in the formidable cataphracti pattern Terminator armor. The Legion's champion would confront the Primarch, wielding a blade wreathed in crackling energy against the Lion's own rugged steel blade. As they clashed, the only thing providing any sort of edge for the captain was his weapon's pulsating power field. However, when the tumult of combat ended, it was the Primarch who emerged victorious, his opponent wounded and defeated, and this would form a bond of mutual respect between the Lion and his sons, and thus the Primarch would bestow the Astartes with the name that would ring throughout the ages, the Dark Angels, a name derived from Caliban's own historic traditions. As news of the Lion's return reached the governing council of masters in the distant Greymoor, the heart of the First Legion, a tumult of conflicting emotions surged throughout their ranks. The revelation of their Primarch's existence stirred a maelstrom of shame and pride, tearing the very fabric of their allegiance asunder. While none dared question the Emperor's decree that Lionel Johnson was their true lord, the council found themselves ensnared in a web of conflicting sentiments. Some amongst them were haunted by remorse and confronted by the stark reality of their legion's tarnished honor and the formidable burden their Primarch would inherit. Others were fueled by a fervent desire to redeem themselves and their legion's standing, yearning to embark on a crusade, seeking to present their new master with a glorious victory in his name. As across the vast expanse of the galaxy, the disparate units of the First Legion mirrored the Council's divided stance, some inspired by the prospect of restoring honor, while others plunged headlong into battle, their fervor reignited with the promise of redemption. Conversely, others sought to disengage from their ongoing campaigns, yearning to make a pilgrimage to their Primarch, who at the moment was back on Terra, being trained and introduced to the complexities that the Master of Mankind would bestow upon his shoulders. There, amidst the hallowed halls of the Imperial Palace, the Primarch would be initiated into the intricate tapestry of war that awaited him. His role in shaping the destiny of the Imperium and humanity as a whole was now unveiled before his very eyes. Following the Emperor's arrival and the Lion's departure, Space Marines of the First Legion initiated a series of rigorous trials and competitions amongst the aspirants drawn from the Order and other knightly organizations within Caliban. These challenges were both physical and psychological, as they served as a litmus test for the candidates' martial prowess and character, in order to separate the wheat and the chaff, as whispers were permeated throughout the halls of Caliban, hinting at the coveted opportunity to join the ranks of the Astartes and ascend from mere humans to a higher state. Yet beneath the surface, a deeper, more clandestine purpose lay within these trials. Beyond a mere selection, it also served to scrutinize the genetic purity of Caliban's human population. For the First Legion, the stakes were twofold: identifying the most worthy candidates for the transformation into superhuman warriors, and assessing the suitability of Caliban as fertile grounds for further recruitment endeavors, all the while ascertaining if their hands would be forced in destroying their Primarch's adopted homeworld. In the wake of the Emperor's arrival and the subsequent integration of Caliban into the Imperium, a significant transformation swept across the world. While the knightly orders of Caliban had long reveled in their distinct identities, often resorting to martial conflict in order to settle disputes, the Space Marine legions stood as almost uniform bastions of unity and purpose. Led by the Lions, the Dark Angels' monumental decision was made: the dissolution of the individual knightly orders and their assimilation into the ranks of the Legion. This profound restructuring aimed to forge a singular unifying force, an identity that would serve the Emperor and the Imperium. However, such a monumentous undertaking encountered no shortage of resistance. Not all within the knightly orders were willing to relinquish their autonomy and pride. Despite the Lions' persuasive rhetoric, dissenting voices would persist, clinging to their traditions and independence in the face of change. Yet amidst the discord, the promise of glory and honor under the banner of the Emperor's cause did sway many to acquiesce to unification. As the Imperial army descended upon Caliban's surface, and dissent rippled throughout its populace, the trials of the First Legion officially commenced, as the majority of Caliban's inhabitants remained poised to join the ranks of the Imperial army, be they Astartes or otherwise. In a remarkably brief span of time, Caliban underwent a metamorphosis unlike any seen before. Once a world of untamed wilderness and ancient forests, it swiftly evolved into a hub of mortal industry. The tranquil echoes of nature were replaced by the relentless clang of factories and hammers, along with the resolute march of soldiers preparing for the crucible of interstellar conflict. The arrival of the Emperors on Caliban brought with them enormous earth-moving machines that methodically cleared dozens of kilometers of forests every single day, leaving behind flat, lifeless soil ready for the construction and cultivation of human industry. This cleared land soon hosted mines, refineries, and manufactura, all designed to best exploit Caliban's abundant resources and convert them into vital war material for the Emperor's Grand Crusade. As industrial sites sprawled across the world, new cities would emerge to support them. These urban centers grew both upwards and outwards, with each passing terra near. Traditional villages and towns surrounding these fortress monasteries would be emptied, as their citizens were relocated better to serve the Imperium, their lives irrevocably changed by the relentless march of progress. And amidst this transition, a significant milestone would be reached. The individuals who had proven themselves would be finally deemed ready to become Astartes. The first aspirants of Caliban would be officially inducted into the First Legion, marking the culmination of Caliban's integration into the Imperium and the solidification of its role in the Emperor's vast interstellar war machine. Word would eventually arrive from Luther that the Astartes had completed their final selection for advanced training and genetic enhancements to join their ranks. As over the next several standard years, through the application of imperial science and the marvels of gene seed, these chosen aspirants were transformed into battle brothers of the newly christened Dark Angels. Luther himself had also been selected to join, like many of the Order's ranks. However, like a significant portion of the initial initiates taken from the Order and other Calibanite knightly orders, he was too old to benefit from the traditional full implantation of gene seed. In its stead, Luther and his peers underwent an extensive series of genetic, surgical, and biomechanical enhancement procedures, which greatly mirrored that of the Thunder Warriors. These modifications significantly increased their strength, stamina, and reflexes to superhuman levels, similar to that of the Astartes, and while they became taller, stronger, and quicker than any ordinary man, they would never achieve the full status of true Astartes. This delineation marked a pivotal moment within the integration of Caliban into the Imperium, as the now transformed aspirants of the Dark Angels symbolized a full blending of Caliban's martial tradition with the advanced capabilities of the Imperium, setting the stage for their future contributions. And the changes to Caliban's knightly orders was not just in physical appearance, but the very fabric of their relationships, as Luther and others were now surrounded by those who had once been their squires and junior knights, which had ascended to stations far above themselves, and as the old order was now amongst warriors who had become far more powerful than they could ever hope to be. Yet Luther would continue to serve as a lion's second within the Legion, a position which he had earned through merit and unwavering commitment to the imperial ideal, as his dedication was undeniable and his contributions significant beyond measure. Despite his achievements, Luther would never be able to shake the inner conviction that he was viewed as lesser because he was not a true Astartes. This internal struggle colored his interactions and added a further layer of complexity to his leadership, as the knowledge that he would never reach the same heights of power as his genetically enhanced comrades nod at him. This sense of inequity, though often hidden behind a veneer of steadfast loyalty and compliance, was a constant undercurrent in Luther's psyche, influencing his actions and decisions. And as Caliban integrated even further into the Imperium, these tensions would continue to simmer beneath the surface, hinting at the challenges and futures which lay ahead, seeing as he was not the only one who felt this way about the change in status. As the remarkable transformation of the Dark Angels was not just a physical metamorphosis, but a profound reshaping of loyalties, hierarchies, and personal identities. And in this crucible of change, conflict would be sown, as individuals such as Luther, amongst others, struggled to reconcile their past glories with the stark reality of their present and future limitations. Eventually, Lionel Johnson and his identity would lead to him being often regarded by his brother Primarchs as a dour and morose individual, a figure of somber determination, as his demeanor was marked by moods and aversions to the counsel of others, all stemming from his stark and simple worldview. His time on Terra did teach him the harsh truth that the war waged on Caliban's monster-hunted forest was merely a prelude, a children's game, compared to the greater conflict ahead. As the galaxy teemed with monsters and his purpose was clear, he was set to destroy them. Unlike Sanguinius, who embraced the chivalric ideals, or Mortarion, who harbored arbitrary hatreds, or even Fulgrim, who was obsessed with beauty and perfection, Lionel Johnson dismissed such passions and distractions. To him, they obfuscated his true goal, the annihilation of mankind's enemies. His single-minded focus on his objective rendered him both more and less than his brothers. As the first Primarch created by the Emperor, he embodied a primal force of destruction. His humanity was greatly eclipsed by his relentless drive. The Lion's approach was rooted in his experiences in Caliban, where survival depended on ruthlessness and clarity of purpose. As his return to Terra did not change his perspectives, rather, they intensified his resolve, as he saw the universe as more of an upscaled battleground, where the only measure of success was the eradication of the threats to the Imperium. This unyielding stance made him a formidable leader, yet it also isolated him, as his brothers struggled to understand and cope with his relentless nature. And in the grand tapestry of the Great Crusade, Lionel Johnson would forge himself as a singular figure, a destroyer forged by necessity and honed by purpose, as he could stand against any of his kin, match blades with Fulgrim, and even stalemate the great strategist Reboot Guilliman. And while others might surpass him in specific skills, none equaled him in the grander scope of battle. His will was marked by bloody-minded determination, as he was unmatched. His talents and the resolute confidence in himself, which some might call arrogance, won him few friends, but his prowess ensured he was placed at the head of his legion far faster than any other Primarch recovered before him. The legion he inherited, however, was in desperate need of its Primarch and a new beginning. Scattered and fractured, the First Legion remained a powerful fighting force, but one whose purpose had become obscured in the long years of the Great Crusade before the coming of the Primarch. They had been mentors, guides to the younger legions, but by now their students had long since found their own wisdom. Now, with the Lion's return, he would grant them a new purpose, one aligned with methods and visions that he viewed and held for the Emperor's Great Crusade. The Lion's ascension marked a turning point for the First Legion, and brought new clarity of vision and a ruthless efficiency they had not known for a long time. No longer were they merely a guide, but they would lead, striking fear into the very cores of the Emperor's enemies. Under the Lion's command, the Legion was transformed into a singular entity, embodying his relentless drive and unwavering focus. Under his leadership, which was characterized by strategic brilliance and unyielding resolve, a new standard for the Legion would be set. His ability to inspire and drive his warriors to new heights of discipline and effectiveness solidified his place at the forefront of the Great Crusade, as the Dark Angels became a symbol of the Emperor's might, once again, and a testament to the indomitable will and perseverance of their Primarch. And one of the first acts that the Primarch achieved was the merging of teachings between Caliban's techno-feudal aristocracy and those of the First Legion's hexagrammation. This fusion created a refined and formidable synthesis of Terra and Caliban, laying the foundations for the new era of excellence, all the while gathering the scattered fragments of his legion. The initial generation of recruits were selected from worthy knights of Caliban and had been undergoing the rigorous process of gene implantation and hypnagogic indoctrination, along with live fire training. And with these fresh initiates at his command, Lionel Johnson was set for his own campaign. Accompanying him were the original 500 warriors who had first arrived on Caliban, as well as various battle groups that had been wrought from Caliban's own populace, who had pledged their allegiance to the now ascended Primarch. This formidable force was bolstered by auxilia companies raised to serve the Imperial Army, and a small retinue of Mechanicum Magi from the Forge World Zana II, who were all eager to court favor with the new Primarch. In total, this army numbered a full 20,000 warriors, approximately a third of the Legion. Each soldier was marked by the promise of a new beginning, all bearing the emblem of the winged sword of Lionel Johnson's Dark Angels, symbolizing their allegiance to the future rather than the grim remnants of their past. Under his guidance, the Dark Angels became more than mere warriors. They became a relentless force which would unify the galaxy under his father's vision. Lionel Johnson led his now formidable host to reunite with the scattered companies of his gene sons, scattered across the vast expanse of the Great Crusade. Finding these warriors amidst the galaxy-spanning war involving 10 billion soldiers was no small feat. It was made possible only by the Lion's strategic genius and the technological prowess of the tech adepts from Zana II, who effectively analyzed the databanks of the Divisio Militaris to pinpoint the companies of the First Legion and where they were engaged. For any other legion, the arrival of a newly discovered Primarch might have been a cause for grand celebrations and ostentatious praise. However, the grim and resolute First Legion responded rather differently. News of the Lion's approach inspired warriors to intensify their efforts further still. Not only had he been rediscovered, but his eye might be directly upon them, so they began to fight with greater and greater ferocity, as they intended to present their father with blood-soaked laurels upon his arrival to any of their battlefields. The Lion's presence had a profound impact on his warriors, as his reputation as a strategic mastermind and an unyielding leader would precede him, instilling a renewed sense of pride within the Dark Angels. The Legion, once scattered and fragmented, began to coalesce and unite under the force of his leadership. The process of reunification was not merely a logistical endeavor, but a reinvigoration of spirit, as the original 500 who had arrived first on Caliban had already pledged their allegiance and gained distinction amongst their ranks, along with the fresh recruits from Caliban who were still undergoing either transformation or training, would represent the new future for these vaunted warriors. Lionel Johnson's vision extended far beyond merely military might, as he sought to integrate many of the aspects of Caliban's knightly traditions within the advanced doctrines of the First Legion's combat practices. As each battle-worn company greeted their new master with stoic reserve, they displayed a silent courtesy, offering a brief but solemn vow of allegiance. The Primarch, Lionel Johnson, would go on to test each of these companies in battle before they joined his growing entourage officially. And true to his nature, the Lion demonstrated his worth through actions and skill, and not through vague words or promises. Those who harbored doubts had the opportunity to match their blade against him in honest combat. After such trials, none within the Legion could question his right to lead. However, his arrival was not without controversy, as some within the Legion harbored misgivings about the sudden alterations to their century-long practices and the shift in authority they represented. Since the Lion's approach was stark and uncompromising, it would reflect his view upon his Legion. They would accept or they would accept. and this perspective was at odds with the more nuanced practices and approaches of some of his brothers, but it would resonate with the core identity of the Dark Angels, as his style of leadership was characterized by relentless focus and the primary goal being accomplished by destroying all enemies within the battlefield. The Lion saw his legion rally behind him, as his talents in strategy and combat, coupled with his resolute confidence, solidified his position within the Great Crusade, as within a few rather short standard years, the Lion had reunited with nearly 100,000 warriors of his legion, and he had led them to the ancient stronghold of the First Legion on Greymoor, as the council masters who had yet to meet him awaited the conclave. Gathered amidst the many glories of the First Legion and their long storied history, the chamber had been filled with the amassment of wisdom distilled from countless battles, and a litany of dusty trophies of past victories, who would serve as silent witnesses to this monumentous gathering. In this hallowed setting, the Lion set about making his legion whole once again. In order to affirm his leadership, he faced the ceremonial champion of the Council Masters in the Ring of Honor. His opponent was Firus Caligate, the master of the host of fire. In their duel, which lasted an hour, something commendable for any Space Marine, would lead to legends being formed. With this final trial completed, the Primarch accepted the title of Grand Master of the First Legion and the leader of the 6 wings of the Hexagrammation, along with the title of High Preceptor of the Orders Militant, as he became the first warrior to consolidate the leadership of an entire legion under his singular banner through combat. The Lion's leadership brought a new surge of purpose to the Dark Angels, as they had now essentially been given a rebirth, a renaissance if you will. To the assembled warriors of the Dark Angels Legion, whose oaths had been sworn through blood and sacrifice, the new Primarch made a solemn pledge. This oath would now be immortalized in the books of the Council of Masters, and it would go as follows. We are the angels of darkness. For us there is no peace, no end but war and death. We shall not walk in the golden halls of mankind's future, but stand resolute in the shadows beyond. While we yet draw breath, the imperium will not fall, and we will not know defeat. I pledge every warrior, every drop of blood in this legion, in the name of victory, no matter the cost. This vow sealed a pact between the Primarch and his legion, uniting them under a shared destiny. As the Dark Angels, now bearing the weight of this oath, embraced their role as a bulwark against the Imperium's enemies. Under the Lion's leadership, they would become an unstoppable force, or die trying, driven by the relentless pursuit of victory, as the echoes of this oath would reverberate all the way to the 41st millennium. In the wake of the Lion's solemn oath to his legion, a transformative reorganization would sweep throughout the ranks of the First Legion, now reborn as the Dark Angels officially. The Primarch would go on to appoint new leaders to oversee each of the wings, which he had meticulously crafted from the remnants of the Legion's former hosts. Drawing inspiration from the noble traditions of Caliban's knightly orders, he formalized the Dark Angels into a diverse series of informal orders, infusing the Legion with the structured hierarchy reminiscent of his homeworld. As the first wave of fresh recruits from Caliban, including the seasoned warriors who had become half Astartes, stood ready to join the ranks and march on to war, Lionel Johnson seamlessly integrated them into the new framework, as merit became the sole criteria for assignments of command and leadership, superseding any considerations of origin or seniority. Amongst the Primarch's inner circle emerged several of his trusted commanders from the Order. Their bonds had been forged through shared trials and tribulation, yet despite the rigorous standards set by the Lion, a hint of discontent seemed to linger amongst some of the long-serving veterans, as authority shifted to those relatively newer entrants into the Legion. The Grand Legion that once had stood on Greymoor yielded to the winds of time and change, as their large bastion was replaced by a more modest fortress designed in particular to guard the burgeoning industrial complexes on the planet of Caliban, while Caliban would retain its status as the bastion of the Legion. their true center of power would lay in the sanctum of the Primarch aboard his flagship, the venerable Gloriana-class battleship known as the Invincible Reason. Here, amidst the whispers of ancient corridors and the hum of technological marvels, Lionel Johnson plotted the course of his legion, charting a path towards the fulfillment of his sacred oath towards his father and the Imperium. As the Primarch stood aboard his flagship, it seemed that a resurgence of the Legion under the Lion was guaranteed, since he had breathed a new life into the Dark Angels, and had dispelled any lingering shadows of doubt that had clouded their ranks, shredding the burdens of the past and its former glories, as they would all embrace the purity of their Primarch's vision, rejuvenated by the promise of a unified purpose. Yet amidst the fervor of renewal, it seemed that there was still some trepidation within the veterans, in particular those who did not embrace the fresh blood from their Calibanite brothers. Unfazed by the descent, Lionel Johnson met resistance with stoicism, choosing to lead by example on the battlefield rather than engaging in debate, entrusting the Legion into the capable hands of masters and knight commanders. He would dispatch Dark Angels on assignments and duties while embarking on separate missions of his own, leading from the front rather than from the back lines. Eventually, the Lion would be guided by a cryptic message received by Caliban's astropathic choir, leading the Primarch to set course for the distant world of Kascham. There, amidst the crumbling remains of a shattered world fortress, the Ultramarines and their garrisons fought a valiant struggle against insurrection, as their steadfast resistance defied the besiegers for a solid 8 solar months. Now, with the Lion's arrival, it seemed there was a glimmer of hope for the Imperial loyalists who seemed to face insurmountable odds. As the fate of Kascham hung in the balance, the conflict would quickly reach its zenith. The rebels would resort to desperate measures, unearthing ancient vaults buried within the planet's surface, where a biogenic plague had been stored. Said plague would quickly be unleashed upon its populace, twisting them into grotesque, inhuman, bloodthirsty monstrosities, devoid of reason save for their insatiable hunger for carnage. The mutated horrors born from the virulent plague descended upon the warriors of the Ultramarines Legion with a savagery that even battle-hardened Astartes found challenging. With much of the Great Crusade's might focused elsewhere in the eastern reaches of the galaxy, relief seemed unlikely for the Ultramarines. Few would dare even entertain the notion of aid coming from the Dark Angels. Yet, as the Invincible Reason had materialized from the warp, its drop pods prepared for imminent deployment, it would be noted that Praetor Atron, commander of the embattled Ultramarines garrison, would momentarily abandon his own stoicism, as he was unable to contain the physical reaction of elation at the unexpected arrival of reinforcements from the first. And amidst this chaos, the Lion himself emerged as a vanguard of the relief forces, leading a formidable contingent of 1,000 Deathwing veterans clad in ebony armor, which would carve through the horde of flesh-craving monstrosities who had threatened the Ultramarines' survival. As the air crackled with a discharge of superheated plasma, they would purge the fortress of all its assailants. Following closely behind the Dark Angels were 10,000 other transhuman warriors, their blades glinting in the dim light as they descended upon the enemy with relentless fury, leading the foes to cower, as swift and merciless annihilation came at the hands of the First Legion. As the Ultramarines ventured forth from their defenses to meet their saviors amidst the carnage, apprehension tinged their anticipation, as they half expected demands for retribution and territorial concessions. This was due to their long history with the First Legion. However, it seemed that the Lion, unlike many Primarchs, harbored no such desires for vengeance or accolades. With the enemy vanquished, he would depart without ceremony, leaving only an empty banner as a silent token. This decisive engagement is amongst the Lion's earliest battles with the Imperium and the Dark Angels proper, and it was a testament to his unwavering commitment to warfare, and it was a great representation for his disdain for the political machinations which many of his brothers had been entrenched in. His sole focus would remain exterminating the enemies of the Emperor and eschewing the trappings of empire building or personal glory to his other brothers. Thus, with Lionel Johnson's ethos guiding them, his Dark Angels would assume their roles in the waning days of the Crusade, gaining victory after victory. Amidst the many victories commanded by the great Lionel Johnson of Caliban, amongst the greatest of them was the imperial compliance of Mullik, as it stands as one of the greatest testaments to the Lion's strategic prowess. A monumental endeavor which saw the convergence of multiple legions, including the Dark Angels, the Luna Wolves, the Emperor's Children, along with the White Scars, and even the Emperor, accompanied by his Primarch sons, as they ventured into what would be the realm of chaos itself. As the dust settled on the events of Mullik, a veil of secrecy would indeed descend upon imperial records, as when the Emperor reappeared, his visage seemed to bear the weight of age. Yet his power seemed to have swelled to unseen heights, and with a deft stroke of psychic manipulation, he veiled the memories of those on Mullik, obscuring the truth even from his own sons. But the secrets were not to be left unguarded, as the Emperor in his wisdom deployed a formidable garrison to safeguard the strange, pre-existing warp gate. Nearly 100 regiments of Imperial Auxilia stood sentinel upon this dangerous locale, their ranks fortified by the might of 3 full Legio Titanica cohorts, and amongst them at least 2 full detachments of Space Marine legionaries stood vigilant, and it is assumed that many of them were from the Dark Angels themselves, who had been entrusted with such secrets and weaponry for eons prior. Yet even as the Imperium stood poised to defend against all external threats, it seemed a shadow loomed on the horizon. The specter of a second and third Rangdan Xenocide seemed to cast a pall upon the galaxy, with a conflict of unimaginable scale and ferocity, which whispered of ancient adversaries in greater numbers than ever before. Amidst those who went to confront the Rangdan were the Dark Angels once more, their presence a beacon of hope as they became the vanguard. Them, alongside the titans of Legio Griffonicus, Legio Bertum, and Legio Kaidos, would fight against the vile Xenos scum, and they would even be bolstered by the formidable forces of Xana II's Mechanicum cohorts, as they plunged headlong into the fray to finally finish off the Rangdan Xenocides. This harrowing conflict erupted in 862 M30, as the resurgence of this ancient menace, once thought vanquished, seemed to potentially threaten the entirety of humanity. With a relentless fury, the Rangdan descended upon the galaxy in the Imperium's northern borders, their numbers eclipsing all previous imaginations. It seems that they had prepared to rush the Imperium and attempt to collapse it under waves and waves of endless numbers. For a decade, the conflict raged on, as the Rangdan descended upon the Imperium's northern borders. And even when it seemed to stretch on for an eternity, the seasoned warriors of the Dark Angels, heirs to the First Legion's legacy, stood firm against the ever-encroaching tide. Their valor was a last line of defense against the annihilation of a myriad of human worlds, both those who had officially joined the Imperium and those who had not. During these Rangdan Xenocides, the Lion would carve a path of his own, as a specter of doom and retribution, hunting each and every one of the nightmarish Xenos invaders. In those early tumultuous years, when it seemed despair threatened to engulf the Imperium, the Lion stood firm, unwavering even. Unlike the radiant Sanguinius or the charismatic Horus Lupercal, he was a stoic presence which assured those on the battlefield that there was at least a singular bastion of solitary strength in the face of such overwhelming darkness. For nearly a decade, the conflict would rage, drawing in a full 9 Space Marine legions into the maelstrom and leaving a trail of devastation across the reaches of human civilization. As the toll was heavy, with each legion bearing the scars of battle, it seems that even the Space Wolves, renowned for their ferocity, mourned the loss of thousands as they valiantly broke the siege of Xana during the Rangdan Xenocides. The Dark Angels themselves, mustering their forces once more, stood ready for battle, yet not unscathed, as they themselves had faced their own trials in this crucible of war. And here, amongst the endless corpses of Xenos mounting, the Dark Angels' new legend was built, as they combated against the scourge of Xenos, lurking beyond the halo stars. Their valor reaching a pinnacle in the harrowing Third Rangdan Xenocide. Around the year 890 M30, the Dark Angels clashed in full force against the Rangdan threat in a desperate bid to safeguard the Imperium's northern reaches from full annihilation once more. The cataclysmic battles that ensued, from the siege of Vorkask Citadel to the fierce engagements over Morkar, bore witness to the Dark Angels' incredible might, as, against overwhelming odds, they stood strong. Even though they paid a staggering price in lives lost, they were able to extract an unsurmountable toll, and winning the day even though it decimated their ranks, leaving them as a mere shadow of their former numerous glory. Rumors would swell amidst the aftermath, surrounding the Dark Angels' sacrifice in mystery. Some speculated that they sought redemption in the eyes of their new master, leading to many of them taking unnecessary risks, while others whispered of darker motives laying beneath the surface. Regardless of the truth, the legacy of the Dark Angels endured as they had conquered, and in the aftermath of the Rangdan Xenocides, the Dark Angels sought to replenish their depleted ranks, turning to their homeworld of Caliban for even more new recruits. And with the Rangdan threat pushed back, a fresh wave of new Calibanite Space Marines joined their ranks, embodying a new ethos, and with new tactics derived from their recent experience against the Rangdan Xenocides. With their new numbers, the Dark Angels re-engaged. One such fleet, under the direct command of Lionel Johnson, set its course for the world of Sarosh. Meanwhile, the Ultramarines Legion, buoyed by their upswell in numbers, stood on the verge of becoming the largest and potentially most powerful singular Space Marine Legion, with approximately 166,000 legionaries by the year 899 M30. Amidst these developments, the feud of Dulan loomed over the horizon, a shadowy conflict that seemed to test many of the Imperium's greatest warriors. As the Space Marine legions continued to expand the borders of the Imperium, each Primarch would vie for distinction in the eyes of the Emperor. Amongst them, Leman Russ, the Primarch of the Space Wolves, harbored the ambition to outshine all his brothers. Only Horus Lupercal and Lionel Johnson boasted more triumphs than Russ, and that fact seemed to gnaw at him deeply. A turning point for this came on the planet of Dulan, and this was in 870 M30, when the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels fought side by side, leading to a feud to spark, whose echoes still reverberate to this day. This was during an incident where a planetary governor by the name of Durath openly insulted Leman Russ, provoking a fury within the leader of the Space Wolves. Russ, consumed by anger, vowed to slay the man, demanding the honor of leading the assault. But Lionel Johnson, the ever meticulous strategist, had already devised a plan and was not about to yield to the command of his impulsive brother. Taking charge of the operation, the Lion would personally execute Durath, leaving Russ seething with frustration as he was denied his vengeance. Enraged, Russ would confront the Lion in a violent clash that would become legendary. For an entire solar day and night, the two Primarchs engaged in a brutal duel, their strength and agility matched in a relentless struggle. And though Russ had greater brute force, the Lion's speed and precision proved a formidable tool to equal this disparity. And eventually, their sons would mirror this duel in a tradition, a ritual if you will. For when the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves met, they would field their champions each and every time in a duel to first blood. This was a sign that even though they may fight, they were united in the solitary goal of ensuring humanity would prosper, and that no bad blood would remain between the legions. Another incident of great note would be the incident which occurred when the Dark Angels' 4th Expeditionary Fleet, once again commanded by Lionel Johnson, embarked on a crucial mission in the compliance to the colloquially known 4-3. This world, formerly under the jurisdiction of the White Scars, awaited integration into the Imperium's fold. As it seems, the Lion's decision had been to heed the call of his brother, Primarch Jagatai Khan, the leader of the White Scars, and how quickly he went to his aid underscores the deep bond between these two solitary brothers, as despite their contrasting personas, it seemed they had forged a connection that transcended their differences. As Sarash, or 4-3 as it was colloquially known, was governed by a bureaucratic regime that seemed to overwhelm anything and everything that they had desired. Even though they had expressed eagerness to to join the Imperium, in large part due to it aligning with their secular beliefs. The bureaucratic hurdles in what could only be noted as the singular most bureaucratic world the Imperium had ever noted harshly impeded their compliance, frustrating both imperial authorities and their appointed governor. And despite the assurances of progress, it seemed the planet's bureaucracy ensnared any movement forward in administrative red tape. It was then that the Dark Angels decided to descend upon the planet to hasten their integration into the Imperium, and coincidentally it seemed that an insidious truth lay beneath the surface. Unknown to those within the Imperial expedition, it seemed that the world harbored a clandestine devotion to elites known as a Mullik, who were beings that existed within the tumultuous realm of the warp. This warp being dedicated cult was shrouded in secrecy, and it openly defied the anti-religious doctrine of the imperial truth, viewing it as a suppression of their religious faith, which it was, as they used the planet's bureaucracy to impede the hastening of integration within the Imperium. Amidst the diplomatic engagements aboard the Invincible Reason, it seemed that tensions were boiling as the Lord High Extractor, representative of the Saroshi bureaucracy, unveiled a fervent and boisterous denouncement of Lionel Johnson and the Emperor himself, directly challenging the authority of the Primarch. And as one would expect, the Lion acted swiftly. Fueled by righteous fury, he silenced the dissent with a singular, fatal stroke of his legendary power sword. Yet, in the confrontation, there seemed to have been a hidden peril, as the Saroshi delegation had hidden a nucleic device poised to obliterate the command hierarchy of the Dark Angel's fleet within their delegation's shuttle. However, it was Luther, the trusted ally of Lionel Johnson, who had been stationed back into Caliban, who, with the aid of librarian Zahariel, thwarted the deadly scheme. Luther's admission of contemplating betrayal during this event seemed to underscore a darker undercurrent within the man, one which was fueled by envy and resentment festering within his heart. Following the turmoil on 4-3, where the rebellion quickly arose and was even more quickly quashed by the Dark Angels and the other garrisoned Imperial forces, lingering doubts would continue to plague the victors. While the insurgents were subdued and the weapon dismantled, it seemed that suspicions of discontent and skepticism arose regarding the ease of which the diplomats had infiltrated the defenses of the First Legion with such a deadly weapon. Luther, Zahariel, and 500 seasoned Dark Angels, hailing from both Terra and Caliban, had found themselves reassigned in almost permanent status, not in open disgrace, but as custodians on the homeworld of the Dark Angels, Caliban, tasked with safeguarding the Lion's Sanctuary, and with the solemn duty of recruiting and training more Space Marines to the Lion's perilous standard. This was during the twilight of the Great Crusade, where the Dark Angels now seemed to epitomize the creed of strength and excellence, remaining steadfast in their mission to further the Emperor's cause. And unlike some of his brethren, just as quickly as the Lion would arrive and complete his mission, he would move on to the next, leading from battleground to battleground, which seemed to cause even more stress between him and Luther. As time wore on, the memories of the Lion's heroic feats somewhat seemed to fade into the background, as he was not one to remain for posterity. Yet amidst the collective forgetfulness, it seemed one individual would remain ever observant of his brother's actions. This was Horus Heresy. Despite his attempt to sway the Dark Angels to his cause and his belief system, it seemed that the Dark Angels' own stubbornness and pride functioned as a shield against his manipulations, as the warrior lodges that Horus and Lorgar worked so hard to form found no foothold within the ranks of the Dark Angels. Seeing themselves rejected by the stalwart defenders of the Imperium, unlike many of the other legions, it seemed Horus had become rather despondent due to the Dark Angels and his brother Lionel Johnson not being swayed by his charm or rhetoric, as their loyalty lay solely with their masters, the Lion and the Emperor himself.